is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and Danielle Allentuck. Danielle, are you sad that the Olympics have concluded?
I am very sad. I'm such an Olympics fan. I love spending my whole day watching it, of course, until I have to go to the stadium, but grew up a swimmer, so I'm especially sad that nobody's going to care about swimming for another 4 years. So,
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's just how it is for the vast majority of people. Although Maryland is one of the bigger swimmer states. We have two of the best Olympians in history coming out of Maryland. So I think people here will care.
yeah.
Certainly you will care.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the general public.
And I'll just tell anybody who wants to listen to me about all the random swim meets that are going on. So,
do you go to swim meets like in your free time?
and not anymore. No, but
not anymore. But that suggests you did.
Well, I was a swimmer for 15 years, so
yeah,
it was such a big part of my life. In Maryland, it is kind of part of the culture. In the summer, everybody swims. It's just part of it.
You'd be surprised, Jonah Schaefer, who's one of our Ravens beat writers, who is tall and looks like he's got a swimmer's body. Apparently, he just can't get it all in sync and cannot get a good form in any of the strokes.
How to float, though. It is like
how to float. He doesn't know how to float.
He said, yeah.
Oh man, that's worse than I imagined. That's terrible. You would think somebody who was born with that kind of height and length. No,
doesn't always translate.
How many injuries did you suffer during your swimming career, Danielle?
I don't think we have enough time for that.
Fair. All right. On today's show, we're going to talk about not swimming, but the Orioles, who are treading water, I guess you could say, right now, as they are struggling a bit, scuffling, coming off a 9-3 loss in the first game of a quick 2-game series to the Washington Nationals. We're going to talk about Grayson Rodriguez's injury and how it could affect the Orioles' rotation. We'll talk about Kobe Mayo's struggles in his first introduction to big league ball. But first, please give us a like, a thumbs up, write us a good review, a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. All right, Danielle, the Orioles entered the month of July looking like one of the best teams in baseball. They were 53-31. And in the time since, they are 2 games under 500. They're 17-19. And it just feels like wins are harder to come by for this team. And every time you think that they're turning the corner, they have a loss like the one last night where it was mostly non-competitive. The pitching wasn't there. Offense certainly wasn't there. You can blame a lot of their recent struggles on injuries, and I think that would be a fair excuse. But it just feels like wins are a little bit more difficult to come by in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you listen just to Orioles fans, you would think that they're drowning right now. Thank you for the reaction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want me to applaud? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
You think that they're like the worst team in baseball right now. They're playing 500 baseball. It's not great. It's not what Orioles fans are used to, but they're just inconsistent right now. They're having a really good game. You think that they're great. Everybody, the bats are working again. And then they have a game like last night where like nothing was working. Part of that is that, their stars are all struggling at the same time. Gunnar and Adley, Ryan O'Hearn are all kind of not putting pieces together. O'Hearn did have a good game last night, though. But it's just they're never putting the pieces together on the same night. So it leads to nights like last night. I think you can make the argument that Trevor Rogers, hasn't had a great start to his Orioles career, over a 7 ERA in his first 3 starts. They're working with him on some adjustments. He admitted that it's really hard to make adjustments and switch to a new team and try to start every 5 days on schedule. But that's what they need him to do. They are hopeful Grayson won't be out for too long, but nobody knows for sure what's going to happen there.
Yeah, it felt like the reinforcements that they were getting at the trade deadline, and it felt good for about 24 to 48 hours, and then boom, you lose Jordan Westberg, and not long after that, you lose Grayson Rodriguez. So you loaded back up at the deadline, and then you get hit with even more injuries to your rotation, to your lineup. A lot of it could be injuries, and like you said, Danielle, guys are getting hot at different times. Adley was cold for a long time. He's finally starting to hit the ball better as of late, but his struggles certainly hurt the middle of that lineup. Colton Cowser has been hitting a lot better as of late, but that comes also at a time when Gunnar Henderson isn't hitting the ball as well. So guys just aren't getting on the same page. I do want to put it all, though, in context, because I looked at the 5 best teams in Major League Baseball entering the month of July. The Orioles were one of those. The Phillies, the Guardians, the Yankees, and the Dodgers were the other four. Orioles, as mentioned, were 53 and 31 entering the month of July. They're 2 games under 500 since. The Yankees were 54 and 32 entering July. They're a game under 500 since. The Phillies were 55 and 29. They had the best record entering the month of July. They're 14 and 21 since. They're struggling the most out of all these teams, 7 games under 500. The Guardians were 52 and 30 entering July. They're 500 since then. The Dodgers were 52 and 33 entering July, and they're just 3 games over 500. And you would think, given all the struggles to all 5 of those teams, that we would be sitting here and the top tier of Major League Baseball would be completely shaken up. We'd see all different types of teams in there. Red Sox, the Mets, somebody would have taken a step forward. The 5 best teams right now are the Orioles, the Guardians, the Dodgers, the Phillies, and the Yankees. All 5 of the best teams in baseball have gone through significant struggles since the start of July, and it hasn't hurt them almost at all. All 5 of those teams are still the 5 best teams in baseball. Why are all of these good teams struggling right now, and why has nobody been able to take advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's in the water right now in baseball.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's all right. We're stretching
But
this a little thin here.
you started this, but something, it's baseball as a whole, I don't know what's up. I know each team has their own unique struggles. I thought the Orioles did look good against the Guardians. What was that? About a week and a half ago, which kind of gave me a little bit of hope that maybe, okay, the Orioles have passed their struggles, and then they went right back to it on the rest of the road trip. I think a lot of teams are struggling with injuries right now. I think a lot of teams are struggling with fatigue. And it's just nobody, you're right, across the league has stepped it up, which is just very surprising and very intrigued to see what happens in the next 6 weeks. Because if everybody keeps playing baseball like this, it's going to be pretty boring playoffs. So I think somebody is going to figure it out. I'm just not sure who. It could be the Orioles. Orioles have a couple of, very obvious cases where they can improve right now. Part of that is the bats just getting it back together, which I do think that they will. I think that they're all just kind of going through struggles at the same time. If they can figure out the rotation without Grayson, not knowing how long he's going to be out for, and in the bullpen, what to do with Kimbrel and Soto, I think that the Orioles can get back to playing at that high level.
Yeah, baseball is a war of attrition given its 162-game slog. It just feels like this year more than ever, nobody's been able to really distance themselves. We thought through the first 3 months of the season that we were going to get this elite upper crust this year of these are the contenders and these are everybody else. And it just feels like every team of those top 5 has their own vulnerabilities. No team is unbeatable. And that means that the Orioles are one of those. They're not a world beater. They're not perfect as we've seen over the last 6 weeks, but they're also still one of the best teams in baseball. I'm glad you mentioned the injuries and the pitching rotation and the bullpen. Let's talk about it. Grayson Rodriguez avoiding serious injury to his lat/teres major. How would you pronounce that? Did you ever have a teres major injury in swimming, Danielle?
No, but a lot of lat. So
a lot of lat. Okay.
It's all connected.
Everything is connected in your body. I would hope you wouldn't have something disconnected. The injury that Grayson Rodriguez suffered, according to Mike Elias, is a relatively mild strain, which is much less severe than the one that he suffered in 2022 that forced him to miss 2 to 3 months. So that is very good news. The Orioles are optimistic that they'll get him back before the end of the season. It's going to be a long slog until then, over a month probably, until he comes back, and you hope that you can get him back in time. Thank goodness that this team has Albert Suarez, because he has stepped up and been a massive contributor at a time when they've absolutely needed him. He's got a 3.39 ERA and 90 1/3 innings. His ERA has never even touched 4 this season. He's stepped up in the rotation. The Orioles are incredibly lucky that they've gotten this kind of production from a 34-year-old that they just signed a few months ago. But they're going to rely on him a lot more in the second half, considering they're not going to be with Grayson Rodriguez.
And I think that they're going to need him. And I do think that there is a chance by the end of the stretch, if Grayson's out, I see a scenario where Albert could become their number 3 starter, which would have been crazy to think of at the start of spring training. But if he just keeps pitching like he has, I think that's how this is going to play out. Dean Kramer and Trevor Rogers, you just kind of know what you're going to get from those two guys at this point in their careers. Granted, they may be able to make adjustments down the stretch, but right now, I feel like Albert Suarez is pitching into, a potential playoff start at the rate things are going. So he's just been such an impressive piece of this team. The scouting department did such a good job finding him, and he's fit right in. And to go from the bullpen to being able to throw 90 or so pitches, in his last start, it just shows the type of pitcher that he is.
Yeah, the Trevor Rogers edition, I think, and I've said on the show before, I think it was more about what the Orioles hope to get from him in 2025 and 2026 than it is about this season, because we saw another struggling start from him last night. 5 earned runs over 5+ innings last night. His first 3 starts with the Orioles have not gone well. And as much as the Orioles invested in him in terms of giving up Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers to the Marlins to get him, I think they were still expecting more from him next season and beyond. They want a full offseason to work with him, but the struggles are certainly disconcerting. A 4.53 ERA when they traded for him, and that has only gone up. So you don't feel good about throwing him out there. They have a while before they have to concern themselves with a playoff rotation, but he's just not pitching like an average major league pitcher right now. It's only 3 starts in Baltimore, and go look at Kyle Stowers' start with Miami. It's been pretty ugly. So, don't judge everybody based off their first couple weeks with the team. But considering this team is in the middle of a playoff hunt, you don't feel great about throwing Trevor Rogers out there every 5th or 6th day.
No, and they do see Trevor Rogers as a long-term investment. They think that, okay, they're just going to get him through the rest of this year, and then the next year he's going to come back. He's going to fix this that they want to make in him, that they've already started with him. But they still need him as part of their rotation until they get there. They still need him to at least keep them in games. He doesn't have to go out and be a Corbin Burns, but they need him to go out and make it competitive, make it so that the bats can come out and even it out for them. And it's just, they're not only 3 starts, still plenty of starts left to go in the season, but so far they're just not getting the performance that they need out of him.
Yeah, he's been disappointing. Another disappointment, and we'll see him tonight in the second game of the series with the Nationals, is Dean Kramer, because you were hoping that you wouldn't have to use him in a playoff series like you did last year, filling in for John Means in Game 3. But you were hoping to have a more consistent pitcher this year, and his ERA has gotten up to 4.70 so far this season, even though it's dipped down close to 3.5 in the middle of the year. He struggled with injuries at times, but he's got negative WAR. His ERA went from a 4.12 last year to 4.70 in 16 starts this year. Somebody who has the ability to eat innings, but you don't feel good about him either. I mean, other than Corbin Burns, there's not a whole lot of sure things right now in this rotation.
I will say that Zach Eflin, I thought has looked pretty good so far in the start of his career. I think some of that was, wanting to go back to Tampa last week and kind of shoving it to them. But I've been very impressed with him. So I think that he is a pretty good, sure thing right now for them if he can keep it up. But you're right about Dean, and that I don't even know. He's just been very inconsistent this year. And when he's consistent, it's very rare that he has a good start nowadays. I think he's made it to 7 innings, maybe once or twice this year. And that's kind of his calling card. It's being able to go late into games, and just haven't seen that from him this year. Maybe he's still battling injuries, but there hasn't really been much that's changed about him. He's just not performing up to what the Orioles expect of them.
Yeah. Zach Eflin, absolutely. The Orioles are going to need him to shove in the second half of the season as well, behind Corbin Burns. All right, the bullpen, as concerning as the rotation has been, you could almost say that the bullpen has been more concerning as of late, because their closer, Craig Kimbrell, has not been used in a save situation since July 25th. Now, the Orioles haven't had a whole lot of opportunities to throw Craig Kimbrell in those situations, but at times they've gone with Yennier Cano. That July 25th game was when he blew a save to the Marlins in that ugly game that the Orioles ended up coming out with the win. He's been inserted in 2 tie games since, and he has left both those games with the opponent leading the game. So he has allowed the opponent to take the lead in those tie games. They're now without Jacob Webb, who also hit the injured list, as Mike Elias said that his elbow is barking. They hope that they can get him back at some point over the final month and a half of the season. But Gregory Soto giving up 8 earned runs in 2 1/3 innings for this team after he was a trade deadline acquisition is certainly concerning. This bullpen doesn't have a lot of sure things either right now.
And I think with the Kimbrell it's very confusing to me. There's been a lot of mixed messaging about it. We've asked about it many times to Hyde and Elias, and they say Craig is our closer. And then you ask, why wasn't he used in a safe situation? They say he was rusty and it wasn't the right time. Okay. Another safe situation. You ask why he wasn't used. You say, oh, it's too short of rest. He needs more time in between starts. But it just doesn't make sense to me. It's very uneven. Their messaging, he's either pitching too close together or pitching too far apart. And if that's the case, just put him every 3 games or something. Just put him on some type of schedule. And if it calls for a safe situation, pitch him in that. But I don't quite understand what they're doing there. Sir Anthony Dominguez has looked good so far, I thought. I think that he could potentially be kind of that fill-in closer guy for them. But Gregory Soto has just been all over the place. And if you look at his season with Philly and kind of his history, it's not too much of a surprise. Which his trade was a little bit surprising. But he had a good night last night, but there's absolutely no stakes, involved at all. I think they were already losing at 8-2 at that point. But it's just been, he just hasn't been able to control the ball at all. And exactly what he was doing with Philly earlier this year. He only had a couple good games this whole entire season. So I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with him. I guess they're just going to have to put him in situations like last night where the game doesn't matter.
And for a guy that it was reported, and he said to members of the media that he wanted out of Philly because he wasn't getting enough high leverage situations. And basically he wanted to be treated as a high leverage or a closer in Philadelphia. And then he comes here and he has struggled so hard that he can't be trusted in high leverage situations at all. You don't want to throw him in anything close to a close game right now. So he has not shown that he deserves those kind of opportunities since he got traded.
And I think the Orioles' problem right now is, so who can you trust in those situations? Right. Cano, Sir Anthony.
Yeah. And
Kimbrel, he's having a good week, but
yeah, Jacob Webb was quietly having a very good season, 3.08 ERA. Without Danny Coulomb, this bullpen certainly needs more. And it's not like Michael Elias didn't try at the deadline. He acquired 2 relievers. I feel like anytime you make 2 deals with a team at one deadline, you're going to win one, you're going to lose one. It's just the odds. And I think that they clearly feel good about what they got in Sir Anthony Dominguez. But right now, what they got from Gregory Soto is not great. And the returns are not great. But they don't really have many other options. They don't have guys, reliable lefties. They have Keegan Aiken. They could bring Cole Irvin back up, who cleared waivers. But those guys don't have the kind of stuff that Gregory Soto has. It's just harnessing that. Right now, if this team were to go on a win streak and try to get themselves in a lot of closing situations, save situations, do you feel like Craig Kimbrel would get those opportunities, or do you think the Orioles would spread it out?
I think it would depend on the day. I think that because the answer changes daily, I can't answer that. I would think maybe today he would, if that was an opportunity, because he hasn't pitched in a couple days. But they could use the answer that he's rusty, and that's why he's not pitching well. So I'm not sure. Cionel Perez has looked pretty good this season, a little bit up and down in the middle there, but I think that he's kind of leveled out for them. But I wouldn't put him in a closing situation either at this point. But a good setup option for them. And I think what's hurt the Orioles now for a couple of years is that they don't have, a top reliever pitching prospect that they can go pull from like they could in just about any other position. You could make Cade Povich a reliever for the rest of the season, but that doesn't really help them out that much because they want him to stay on a starter development. And what if another starter goes down and you need him to come up and be able to fill innings for you? So they're kind of stuck there not having those top pitching prospects that they can pull from.
Yeah, Cade Povich right now is back down in AAA, and he's thrown 7 innings in his first 2 starts back down in AAA. First one was good, gave up 2 runs. Second one, not as good. Struck out only 3, gave up 8 hits in 7 innings, allowed 4 runs. So I think the Orioles want to try to give him a little bit more time, but he could be, on a similar path that DL Hall was on at this point last year, where he gets called up at the end of the year. The problem is he doesn't have the kind of electric stuff that DL Hall did. DL Hall profiled very well as a reliever because he had, a top tier fastball and he had some very good off speed pitches. So that's not Cade Povich. That doesn't mean that Cade Povich can't be effective for this team, but I think he makes more sense as a starter than he does a reliever. And it's clear the Orioles don't feel great about having him as a starter right now at the big league level. And Chase McDermott is still on the injured list. So that's another one of your top pitching prospects that is unavailable to you right now.
Right. And I don't know the outlook on Chase. I'm not quite sure if they know yet. It sounds like it's a bit iffy if he'll be back this year at all. So that's not really an option that they can consider right now.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the prospects that the Orioles can draw upon, and it's certainly a thinner list than we've seen in recent years. For all the talk that we've had over the last couple of years that the Orioles really need to move some of these guys. They need to deal away some of their depth at the AAA level. There's no room for these guys. Well, they made moves, and now it suddenly feels like they've gone from the cupboard is overstocked and overflowing to the cupboard is a little bit more bare than we feel comfortable with. Kobe Mayo right now is in the big leagues. He's one of their top prospects, obviously. He just came in as the number 10 prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, in their brand new rankings. Samuel Basallo, one spot behind him. Kobe Mayo right now in the big leagues is struggling, has yet to get his first big league hit. After starting his first 3 big league games at third base, he's gotten just 6 plate appearances in the last 9 days. And I know this team is trying to make the playoffs. They're fighting with the Yankees at the top of the AL East. But Danielle, it feels like he went from prize prospect, who we want to clear the path for, we want to give him as many opportunities as possible, to suddenly you'll get your chances when we feel fit. And right now we feel like you're not contributing very quickly.
And yeah, I think Kobe is going to be kind of a fascinating, maybe not fascinating, it's not the right word there, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with him. You know, the Orioles have shown not a lot of patience with their prospects at the major league level, which isn't uncommon among other teams as well. But how long are they going to let him struggle for versus sending him back down to AAA? They do have JD Davis now in their system, who's been performing well in AAA, who can come up and help with some infield depth in the majors for them. But do you let Kobe struggle and hope he figures it out at the major league level and just kind of know you may not get great at-bats from him for a couple weeks maybe? Or do you send him down for potentially the rest of the season and bring up a guy like JD Davis to fill that spot? And I think that's a decision they're going to have to make. I would imagine this week. I think by the end of the week, we'll kind of know which direction they're going in there. But, you know, they didn't let Jackson Holiday figure it out at the majors. They didn't let Colton Cowser or Grayson Rodriguez. Jordan Westberg is a little bit different because he came up and had success right away. But it's going to be very interesting to see how long did they let him struggle for versus just setting him down and see if he can figure it out in AAA and bringing him back this year. Because if they send him down, it's kind of hard to see a scenario where they bring him back up this year.
Yeah, and it's awfully hard to get yourself out of a funk when you're barely playing. I mean, if he had more opportunities, if he was starting more games, then maybe there was a chance that he could just work his way out of it. Yesterday at Camden Yards, I saw him taking some early BP. So clearly they're working with him on some things, but he's not getting a lot of opportunities in games. I mean, when he got called up, I did a show with Andy Costco, who said that the reason they're calling him up is to play him, because that's what we saw immediately out of the gate with Jackson Holiday, with Colton Cowser, with Jordan Westberg, was they would play them straight out of the gate. And it wasn't until they hit their struggles. And for Kobe Mayo, the lease was shorter than ever, 3 games as a starter, before they decided, you know what? You haven't gotten a hit yet. You have 2 walks. We don't consider you a good enough piece right now to help us win. And at that point, if you have a guy who is a prospect, we saw it with Heston Kjerstad even, if there's not room for him to start, his development would be better served down in AAA where he can start. And I think that's what we saw with JD Davis. Like you mentioned, the signing on a minor league deal, the Gene Segura deal that we just saw. The Orioles are preparing for a world where they sent Kobe Mayo back down. I don't know when that's going to be. Gene Segura's only got 2 games right now in AAA, but they clearly felt like they needed the depth. They have Livan Soto, who they traded for, who's down in AAA. Nick Maton is somebody who has big league experience, who came up at one brief point earlier this season. I think they're preparing to send Kobe Mayo back down and hope that his next go round in the big leagues will be better than his first one.
And I do wonder if the Orioles will kind of start to address this going forward, because all of their top prospects have struggled at the major league level. It's not just Kobe. it's not just Jackson. It's been, a trend over the past couple of years. And the jump from AAA to Major League is huge. There's nothing like it across the levels, but, Gunnar Henderson had the same experience. So I do wonder if it's time for the Orioles to kind of start looking at how they're developing their prospects. And, Kobe Mayo and Heston Kjerstad have nothing left to learn in the AAA when it comes to hitting.
Right.
You can argue about the defense all you want. They probably both need a lot of work there, but that's something you can figure out at the Major League level. But is it time for the Orioles to start addressing that they prepare the prospects better for the Major League debut, so you're not seeing weeks upon weeks of struggles from them?
Right. And from the outside, like you said, Danielle, we look at the stats, we look at their production in AAA, and I would agree with the decision to bring up Kobe Mayo when they did. I could say that they could have brought him up earlier. Same with Jackson Holliday. I thought he could have made the big league roster out of spring training. From our vantage point, we're not privy to the same kind of analytics and statistics that they are, but it's certainly, I don't think the Orioles are doing anything process-wise when they bring these guys up. But you do wonder why they're coming up to the big leagues and struggling immediately. I don't think this is an Orioles only problem. I think that this happens with top prospects around the game, and you see it happen time and time again where guys get called up and they struggle immediately. They go back down, they come back up. That's what Mike Elias has indicated before. It just is interesting that the last several top prospects the Orioles have brought up have struggled out of the gate. And even if you extend it to pitching, Grayson Rodriguez, somebody who came up last year and at the start of his big league career struggled, had to go back down to AAA more than once. So it happens. And the Orioles are in a spot right now in their life cycle where, when Adley Rutschman came up in 2022 and he struggled for his first 6 weeks, went a long time without recording an RBI, they weren't as concerned about winning baseball games. So they said, you know what, Adley, you're starting almost every day. We're going to give you as many at-bats as possible for you to work your way out of this. And with Gunnar Henderson at the start of the 2023 season, it was early enough that they had some runway, and they said, Gunnar, we're going to let you work your way out of this. It's August 14th right now. This is not the time for your starting third baseman to be still looking for his first big league hit now, a week and a half into his big league career. They got to win games, and it's clear that they're prioritizing winning right now over developing these top guys at the big league level. They're still concerned about developing them, but they're worried more about winning right now, and it's just an interesting dynamic that we haven't seen with this team since Mike Elias took over.
And back to the point that, prospects across the league are struggling when they come up. That's very true. You see that, on basically every team. It's not universal, of course, but the thing that I bring up the Orioles for is that these aren't just like the top prospects in the Orioles system. These are the top prospects in baseball. Jackson Holliday is the number one prospect, or was the number one prospect. I haven't seen the new rankings yet.
He still is, yeah.
I think Kobe Mayo is number 10 now overall. So if these guys are struggling, how is anybody supposed to figure it out? So
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Nobody is safe.
I would love to hear it. I would love to hear how teams are finding success with their prospects coming up right away. But it just seems to be, a very hard transition, and teams have to figure out what they do about it.
Yeah. Speaking of those MLB top prospect rankings, according to MLB Pipeline, they did release new ones last night. We saw Holliday first, Mayo 10th, Basayo 11th, as mentioned. And you saw Griff O'Farrell, the Orioles' second-round pick, come in at number 9. You saw Max Wagner drop all the way down to 23. You saw Vance Honeycutt, their first-round pick, debut at number 4, a couple spots ahead of Enrique Bradfield Jr., who, by the way, just got promoted to Double-A Bowie. So you've already seen some shifting, and for a team that was so flush with infield prospects, it was not that long ago that we were saying, oh my gosh, Jackson Holliday, Joey Ortiz, Kobe Mayo, Jordan Westberg, Darryl Hernandez, Connor Norby, where are the Orioles going to fit all these guys in one infield? After Kobe Mayo, who's the Orioles' second ranked prospect in their top 30, the next infielder is all the way down at number 9, and that's Griff O'Farrell. So, and he's not going to debut for a long, long time. So it's not like they have the top prospects, the top infield prospects waiting in the wings. One more thing I want to say real quickly before I let you go, Danielle, about this team going forward, because we are still not panicking for all the struggles and for the 30-minute podcast that we just spent on the concerns that we have about the Orioles. You could be looking at a late September where the Orioles get back Grayson Rodriguez, Jordan Westberg, Danny Coulombe, Jacob Webb, Jorge Mateo, maybe, Heston Kjerstad, That's 6 impact players that the Orioles are hoping to get back before the end of the season.
Mm.
I don't know if all 6 will come back. I don't know when all 6 will come back and if they will have enough time to get ready for the playoffs. But I think if you're looking for a beacon of hope for this team as they go through their struggles since the start of July, you can look at the injured list and say there's a lot of impact players out there that are ready to come back, hopefully before the end of the regular season, that could really impact this team and get them hot right before the end of the regular season.
Definitely. And I think half of those guys are probably sure things. I think we're going to see Hudson Kirkstead back this year. Concussions are very finicky from somebody who's had multiple. You can't put a timeline on when he's going to start to feel better, but he did start a rehab assignment yesterday. So that's a great set. I do think Jacob Webb and Grayson Rodriguez are pretty promising, that they should hopefully be back this year, with plenty of time to ramp back up to where they need to be. I think Jorge Mateo and Jordan Westberg are a little bit more iffy, but you never know. It's a less severe injury than if it was your throwing arm or something like that. So they could also, make a late appearance, which could help them with some of this infield struggles that they're going on right now at third base. So plenty to be hopeful about. Still plenty of season left, and still one of the best teams in baseball. So
Yeah,
they're really lucky that everybody else is also struggling right now.
exactly. They're not on, like Olympic record pace, but there are a lot of laps to go, Danielle. One
Nice.
might say. I'm glad you mentioned your multiple concussions. So I eventually got it out of you how many injuries you suffered while in the swimming pool. At @D_Allentuck is Danielle's Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at Allbanner Sports. Please like, rate, review, subscribe. Read all of Danielle's great work on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, where John Mioli and Kyle Goon and Andy Koska have you completely covered. Thanks so much for tuning in.